For this one in particular, I wanted to stick a little bit with entrepreneur. Excuse me. And the website that they did for this particular thing in terms of 10 social media trends for to watch in 2019. Now, I'm going to be going over some of the things they discuss, as well as talk about some of my own assertions based on prior research to kind of help with this. So let's go ahead and get started with this. And I like how it starts with in terms of rebuilding trust. A lot of this will talk a lot about what we call media literacy. As you can see here in the bottom, saying that younger generations have little tolerance for marketing that comes off as disingenuous. This is where a lot we come into social media influencers, and we'll talk more of that as we go along. However, this is an interesting perspective because, again, what we're talking about is probably, as millennials and Gen Zs are usually some of the most media literate clients, or there are. It's a very popular demographic in terms of understanding things like fake news and solicited advertising, so much so that they're having to dial things back quite a little bit in terms of what the law is standing for. And the EU and the FTC are both building into this. So, and again, this is about invasive advertising. We're talking about a lot in social media. And it gets into our second part of it. And there's kind of an upside and a downside for the social media is about storytelling. I like this one in particular because we talk a lot about word of mouth communication within a digital format. So it used to be one of the worst things about word of mouth communication was the reach. So if you've ever taken a medium planning class before, reach is basically how many people can you get within your universe to view a particular advertisement. So when I talk about universe, this is a set sample within your population. So what we've noticed over the past couple of years is that we're starting to get a little bit different in terms of how things are advertised. First and foremost, it's very niche based. So when you are looking at an advertisement, social media has really gone to the market of it's not inherently how much money you spend or how many people you view. It's about how interactive and participatory your audience is going to be within that niche community. So if it's a small community that's paying quite a bit of attention to what you're doing, trust your judgment, trust your credibility, likes you, this can actually go a much longer way than a regular advertisement trying to sell you something through the means of traditional mediums like television or radio or newspaper or magazines or what have you. So in this case, understanding that social media is about storytelling gets into an interesting facet about, first and foremost, the many social media outlets that are using storytelling, like Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, that have story features. And it's popular because we want to humanize ourselves. So when we're talking about niche-related content, the biggest thing is to be able to humanize ourselves and make ourselves look like that we're a brand that works with the community. This started with a lot of corporate social responsibility, talking about how we helped within our community as an organization, kind of like civic engagement and civic participation. But what also, the other thing that we look at is how we build ourselves as the narrative, and it kind of gets into our third one, that we talk a lot about the narrative behind the brand, what we do, and this sort of thing, which can be within varying of success. For instance, Fanta decided to build a narrative around their history of their product, which, if you know the history of their product, was built distributed in 1930s Germany during World War II because they couldn't get the correct ingredients for Coke. So, you might want to stay away from that particular history. But it is the narrative that we're focusing on. And I think one of the most interesting things about narrative is how we're starting to change the landscape when it comes to marketing, when it comes to PR, when it comes to advertising. And this was something that a gentleman by the name of Don Schwartz, who is a scholar at Northwestern, he's in integrated marketing communication, started to say that advertising was a zombie. I like how he categorized it as a zombie, because his notion was what we're dealing with this whole notion of advertising as a zombie is that what we knew about advertising has all changed. We have moved completely away from our 30-second spot, and now we have to regroup. Now, he was talking specifically to scholars, but it deals a lot, again, with people who are in the industry. It's not about how much money you spend anymore, but where you spend it. And so you can make a lot of good money just spending in the right places here. Excuse me. And one thing that we'll notice in terms of quality over quantity is we're trying to look into certain content that works in a sense that people will enjoy it more. Now, I will mention that there is some issues with algorithms for things like Facebook, as well as things like YouTube, to where if you're posting quite a bit, one thing that will happen is that you usually get to see more of what you're posting. So that's usually a good thing, because you want people to be able to see what you're doing, and the more you post, the more you get an opportunity to be seen. Now, the problem with that is in terms of what's called an edge rank, which starts to look at how people are reacting towards whatever it is that you're posting. Now, it's important to post quite a bit of material and to kind of keep your social media site fresh, especially if you have a lot of followers, because otherwise fake accounts can start to get in and kind of take over what you tried to build. Whereas, I'm going to show you, I'm hoping I'm going to show you, if my internet wants to be good to me here. I'm going to show you a good example of being able to create good quality material. And this is Arby's Facebook page. Now, if you're not really into like a video game scene or movies or anything like that, you may not get this, but they work a lot with their cardboard, with their sauce, to create very intricate and detailed pieces of art. And you may not know what this is from, but you can't deny that the level of detail is pretty cool. So this is a good example of what is done in terms of the quality. And Arby's is well known, as I'm seeing, they've got 3 million people that like it, 3 million people that follow it. That's kind of a cool ratio too, because the likes to follows are usually quite a bit different in terms of most people like it and don't follow it. But this is not only liking and following, so that's a good sign for Arby's there. Put a human face to your brand. This is something that a marketing executive by the name of David Meerman Scott, which you will hear a lot of his name when I talk in class. He talks about what it means to be real. And I like this facet. This is kind of a cool area within marketing in general, and what it means is we rely a lot on, as advertisers, to be working with stock photos. So we see this happening over and over and over again, of using stock photos of people who work in our particular field or our particular workplace. And David Meerman Scott said there were 2 websites, and he was like, there's probably way more than that, that used the same stock photo to say that this is a person who worked for us. And so they were saying, this person has a lot of free time on their hands to be able to work in 2 different areas. So again, being able, good grief, I am not doing well on this. But this is where getting a personal touch comes into play. I know a lot of craft beer companies use this human face to be able, and I'm not just talking about CEOs or CFOs or CMOs. I'm talking about people who work at your place of business or people who are doing big things at your business. Now, we will talk a lot about influencers, and this is one of my favorite places to do this is because this is actually one of my line of research. I do a lot with social media influencers. So next week, we'll talk a lot about law and social media influencers. So that's going to be a real important one to talk about. And influencers make a big difference. They absolutely do a lot of things that again, have that personal touch, increase the narrative, have good quality content, and are able to get that niche for your particular group. Now, it will differ from medium to medium in terms of your social media platforms, which I find fascinating because we see that a lot of influencers, depending on their platform, can do a lot of big things. And what I mean by that is some of them on YouTube, it's almost better if they are small and aren't getting a lot of the same publicity and fears of being a sellout, whereas Instagram is almost the exact opposite in this case. So they look for very, very good production on everything. So we'll talk a lot about that. I'm not going to stay too far on that one. Then is selfie videos. And it has taken me the longest time to get into selfies personally. However, it is a major facet in terms of branding yourself with this. And I work still as a social media manager for the Wishfast 5K that's based in North Dakota, where I got my doctorate. And we talk a lot about selfies and being able to look in terms of transmedia, but what that I mean, like taking selfies with our outdoor media and taking selfies with participants and how that creates a better brand in that picture. And so that is something that has become quite a bit in terms of tradition within social media. And then segmentation. I talked about this a lot already. How do you segment your social audiences? I do love this quite a bit. Again, in terms of what makes you credible. This was actually done on a focus group on my dissertation. I talked about vaping communities and said, these celebrities that you're seeing that are specific to the vaping community, is that something that intrigues you? And the overwhelming response I got for all the focus groups was that I don't care as much all the time about, let me back up. I like the fact that, this social media influencer is talking about this. They seem relatable. They seem like an everyday person. I'm not going to necessarily buy this right off the bat. However, I'm going to look it up. But the big thing was, a few people mentioned, like, if I looked up online and saw Leonardo DiCaprio vaping or, LeBron James, I wouldn't really care about it. And this is something that Blue e-cigarettes at the time was doing with Jenny McCarthy and Stephen Dorff, where they would promote these big name celebrities to talk about vape or e-cigarettes, and it was really completely the wrong way to do it, especially as everything was evolving. Social media influencers were the way to go, and so my dissertation was on a YouTube site called Vape Capital. And again, they're talking about how they use social media influencers. And this also gets into this hyper-targeted personalization. Excuse me. And so this does look quite a lot in terms of understanding what exactly do you want. It's often said that Google knows you better than most people in your life based on what you search for. And not only search engine optimization, but understanding for things like return on investment, as well as how people look at the your searches through their algorithm through big data. And you'll see a lot of this throughout the readings is big data. Being able to look into everything that you post and everything that you've looked up. So, I mean, look at your social media feed and see if there are any advertisements that are akin to you specifically. Now I'm looking to see if there's any advertisements for these in particular. I don't know why I've got something for like swimsuit wear. I haven't looked up anything in that regard for a while, so I don't know why that's going on with that one in particular, but it does get into a characteristic of hyper-personalization, and this comes up quite a bit in terms of when I log into my Twitter. So if you are following me on Twitter, I don't think a lot of people, if anybody, is so far, and that's fine, you don't have to. I get a lot of gaming notifications, regardless if I'm following somebody or not, so that's a major consideration. And then know your platforms. It depends on where you are within your social media. Knowing your platforms is going to be very, very strong within this particular long-standing project that we're going to be doing throughout the course of this semester, is understanding how each one works, and is there any difference between what's being posted on Facebook versus what's being posted on Pinterest, for instance. There's a lot of problems within brands that they just go on Hootsuite, for instance, and post the exact same things for every single medium. And that's an issue because every single medium that you're looking at, whether it's Snapchat, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, whether it's YouTube, whatever it may be, has a different language, has a different way of sharing content and promoting content. And so this has to be talked about, and this has to be ciphered out depending on what you are promoting. And it also has to do with media share. So for instance, a lot of us within social media, especially my students, talk about Wendy's a lot, and their Twitter being exceptional in terms of being, as they put it, savage towards every other brand and every other person that tries to throw any kind of heat towards them in terms of being rude. But again, that's a different language than if you go on their Facebook page. Go on Wendy's Facebook page, for instance, and see what the tone is. Now, it's somewhat the same, but it's also slightly toned down. So again, this is a very popular trend in terms of understanding what language that you need to be speaking within social media. And this is where we'll get into what's called a SMART plan. I'll probably talk about that tomorrow because I think that's a really important thing to hit on right off the bat. So that's going to be it from me for today. Like I said, make sure you're completing the About You. Otherwise, keep me posted on what you plan to do within your project, because I want that kind of decided on week 1. Even though do give it some thought. Don't just pick the first client you think of. But the other thing is participate on Facebook. If you see something in terms of social media relays, place it on Twitter, and use the hashtag for the class. This all comes into participation for this class. So I appreciate y'all's time, and I will talk to you at some point on Wednesday.